former narcotics officer, former team leader, and selected marksman on their emergency response unit, along with being a lead use of force trainer. He was involved in an on-duty shooting in 1989. Chief Edwards holds a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Marion College of Fond du Lac. How'd I do, Chief?
Horrible.
Horrible. And is a graduate of the Northwestern School of Police Staff and Command in 1999. Chief Edwards oversaw the response and investigation of the Sikh Temple shootings on August 5th, 2012 in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. We all saw that on the national news. So it's our privilege to have as our next speaker, and would you please welcome Chief John Edwards.
I'm going to do a little bit more walking around. I do want to say, being from Wisconsin, we do believe that something good comes from Detroit. We call it 2 wins a year for the Green Bay Packers. I'm a season ticket holder, so I have to go there. I want to thank you all for having me. I'm humbled that you'd asked me to come and speak. After following the general, it's going to be kind of tough, but it is amazing to me some of the things that he talked about, how it bleeds over to law enforcement. I understand that this is a combination of law enforcement, fire, officials, mid and upper level, at city levels, different things like that. So I'm not going to discriminate. I might pick on all of you when I talk about some things. What I believe in is that it's our responsibility in law enforcement, whenever we have a critical incident, to talk about what happened. And I'm not talking about getting up and putting a ribbon on and saying, look what we did, it was so great. We need to talk about our failings, where we went wrong, what didn't work for us, as well as some of the things that did work right, but so that others don't go through that. We need to do that. And, I have run into some of my peers who don't believe the same. They don't think that's something that they want on their agency. We made mistakes. I failed in areas. I'm going to talk about those. And the people who did really well were the officers who responded. And there's a reason for it, and it has to do with leadership. A lot of the leadership prior to me being chief. I've been chief there since 2010. 2012 came around. That's when I understood my role, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. And as the general was talking about, in my career, the happiest I ever was when I was in a patrol car, third shift, hunting, out at night, driving around looking for things. I loved it. Some days when I'm sitting in my office signing all the papers or talking to the city administrator or whoever I have to talk to that day, I miss getting kicked in the groin and punched in the nose. It may sound silly, but I miss it. The last 4 years aren't the happiest of my career, but I've probably learned more about leadership and why things were done prior to me being in that position, and how it helped the officers succeed that day, and how it actually made our community come together. Our community fared very well after this incident, and it came together as a whole. And in part, about what was done on our level, but also the victims of the Sikh Temple shooting, and how they responded with us, made it just huge. And there are 2 cities in the United States that have had 2 active shooters. They're both in Wisconsin. Brookfield, Wisconsin, and Oak Creek. In 2004, we had an individual with an Uzi and a handgun come into a hotel and kill 3 people, shoot 4 others, take a reservist hostage, and I was a team leader at the time when we got him out of when we talked him out of the room on that day. And we implemented a lot of changes. And you'll hear me talk about a little bit. Unfortunately, law enforcement and municipalities in general, we wait for something to happen before we decide to implement or buy or get some equipment that we think might help. We always put it off. We always wait for something tragic to happen and say, hey, we should probably get that. And what I'm here to tell you is you need to prepare for things. And if you haven't, you're behind the 8 ball. And the chief prior to me did that a lot. He prepared everybody for that. I'll tell you a little bit about our city. When I get into this, I'm going to talk some of the things about fire that we dealt with in the fire service. When we had this happen in our police department, some of the things that happened with city aldermen, the mayor, some people opened their mouths who shouldn't have. And it's a lesson learned. Some people should never talk. They should maybe cast votes and never be heard. And I believe that. There's a role. Everybody has one. We all should know what our role is. Just to give you an idea, I am not an expert in any of this. I just come from a city that had some of the things happen, and I was thrust into it, and I had to deal with some of these things, and it came out very well. Oak Creek, this is just our demographics to give you an idea. We're not a big city. In Milwaukee County, we're the southernmost edge. The city of Milwaukee borders us on the north. The airport's there by us on the north. We also have the interstate running right through us, and we're 80 miles from Chicago. So we have a lot of transient traffic. Just about anything you can think of, we have happen there. So I just give you an idea what the demographics. I've lived there my whole life. I love Oak Creek, I love the city, love everything about it. What makes it kind of nice is when I went to the high school there, my daughters have gone to that high school. Those cake parties I was at when I was in high school, and I would run away from the cops when they showed up at 2 in the morning. When I became a cop, and those same cops who were chasing me did the same thing and went the same way, and I knew all the escape routes, I would go to the escape routes and wait for everybody to come down. It was almost like driving deer. So there were advantages to it. Here's our department. Like I said, we're not big. This is majority police departments in the United States. As far as the size, 58 sworn, 85 total employees. We're down because of staffing. I put a couple things up here, just, we have an emergency response unit. It might seem like a lot, 26 for a 58 sworn, but we separate all the groups out, and we've built on that over the years. The chief prior to me, who was a trainer, he was a former trainer before he became chief, and he pushed every time. He never came to us and said no. He always fought for something if we asked for it, so we always were very progressive in our area, getting equipment, training, and things that we needed. I put up there 15 specialty units for a couple reasons. When we're talking about working, I worked third shift for 15 years. I know what it's like to drive around in February and try to keep my forehead from slamming into that steering wheel when you got the heat cranked up, when it's 30 below zero. So we have specialty units that help officers break up the monotony. Something else to do so you're not just out there patrolling. So every department has some form of specialty unit. It's one of the ones that, listening to what the general had to say when we're talking about some of the things that bleed over, he was talking about the suicide rate. We have the same problem with law enforcement. We're seeing it more and more, the suicide rate. In my area alone, I know of 10 that have happened within the last year. So it's an epidemic. And one of the things that we created on our department was a career survival unit. It's basically made up of officers, dispatchers, clerical, anyone who works in the department, other than supervisors. It's a peer group so that they're tasked with keeping an eye on their family. The family in our building. Just like the general was talking about accountability, reliability, who is accountable to who, you look out for each other. They are tasked with finding those people in the department who are having issues, whether it's a divorce, maybe some alcohol dependency or something going on. They go to them and they give them the resources. Coming from me seems very suspicious. They think I'm coming out to get them. There's some discipline coming. We let their peers handle it, unless it needs to come to me. So that's how we handle it. One of the issues with that is we have the officers, we have trained them. Anyone in here in law enforcement understands, when they think they're suspicious of me, the thing we need from cops is that you are in control and you trust no one. That's how you survive on the street. You need to do that. And I think one of the issues we've run into is we've trained so well, and we've ingrained that so well into law enforcement, that there's no separation. So that part of the time when they're on the street, when they need that, when they need to trust nobody and to be in control completely, that's great. They're doing what we need. But when they come back in the building, in those non-essential times, what happens? They start not trusting supervisors because they're not in control of what's going to happen. We're the one telling them things. When they get into their home life, what happens? They may have some issues going on they're not in control of. We haven't figured out how yet to separate that and try to get them to understand you can't always be in that mode. And I think that's one of the problems and one of the biggest things we face as leaders is how do we address that? And I don't know the answer, but at least we've identified it and need to look at it. This is a timeline of the shooting at the Sikh Temple. When I was talking about what happened on that day, some of the equipment things that the officers had. I like to call this 6 minutes of excellent police work. Anything that you saw on television or some of the reports, all the chaos that was going on, all the bodies, people walking around, this is really what handled the problem. The lieutenant on scene was shot immediately, shot 17 times. His officers showed up as they started coming in. There were 6 officers working. We have an 11-person day shift. 7 of them were working that day. So they start showing up at the temple after the lieutenant shot and they took over. They handled that problem in 6 minutes. They took care of it. The lieutenant was there, and there's some things he did I'll talk about later that go towards leadership, and it's amazing to me what he did, some of the things being shot, how he was bleeding out. But this is pretty much it. From the time of the call at 10:25 to when Murphy's there, the lieutenant is there within 2.5 minutes, really, it's about 3 minutes. He immediately gets out of his car, finds 2 bodies. There were 2 brothers who were executed. And then as he's walking up, the shooter comes out of the building. And they engage immediately at it was about 40 yards. This man's military trained. He was in psych ops at Fort Bragg, and he was a bodyguard there. I was told initially, first of all, are there any federal law enforcement here today? Sweet. I was initially told that, you know, he wasn't high-end, he wasn't high-speed, anything like that. I did talk to some people he worked with after the fact, and he was high-speed. He had specialized training. So at 40 yards, he comes out of the building, one hand, as he's moving, he and Lieutenant Murphy fire shots simultaneously. They both fire, those bullets must have passed. Lieutenant Murphy catches it right under the chin, bullet goes through his throat, through his voice box, hits his spinal cord, ricochets down into his torso. That bullet's still there today. And he missed the shooter, but that shot he made at 40 yards moving. Military teaches a lot of moving and shooting. Law enforcement is tough to do because of your, you know, making sure everything's safe. But tactical teams do it a lot, but not patrol. We need to do more of it. He then, what he did was push the fight. He was almost as if he was an officer dealing with an active shooter. He treated Lieutenant Murphy like he was the active shooter. He ran at him. He didn't run away. He ran at him. He charged him. He actually flanked him. As Lieutenant Murphy went to cover behind the car, he flanked around him, shooting as he ran, dropping mags, and just kept reloading. Till he got up to him, and basically what happens then is, say this is a vehicle, and this is the front end of it. Lieutenant Murphy was crouched down. Here he's got one in the throat. He knows he's hit. He's figured, okay, I know where the guy was. I'll come up and I can catch him and I'll shoot him. As he stands up, shooter's on the other side of the car, had flanked him, is now standing over the hood like this, looking directly at him. Fires, blows off his thumb, takes the gun out of his hand, and he's disarmed immediately. Then proceeds to shoot him. We found 37 shell casings around Ryan, where he was, 17 hit. One directly in the back of the head, behind the ear, did not penetrate his skull, and he never lost consciousness through that whole time. Just amazing, just amazing. So that happens. Officer Lenda, who I am proud to say is the most senior member of my police department. Not the senior member of day shift, the most senior member. When Sam shows up at scenes, officers are glad. Sam's here. When I was hired 30 years ago, I think about some of the things when I was a patrol officer, some of those officers who were there who were the day shifters. We had a name for them, day shift daisies. And I did not want any of them backing me up because I was worried about what they would do or how they would handle themselves. 30 years forward, we fast forward, it's a testament to law enforcement, the training that we have incorporated in law enforcement in that 30 years, that now the most senior person on that department is the one they look forward to being there. He's a firearms instructor. He works for the State Department. He trains sniper craft overseas. He's a selected marksman on our team still, but he's been all over Africa, India, other places to teach sniper craft to militaries through the State Department. So he shows up, and again, the shooter at about 75 yards now, as he's shooting Lieutenant Murphy, sees Sam Lenda pull up, and he starts yelling at him. He draws his attention, he starts walking, and as he's moving, he fires again, 75 yards. puts a bullet through the windshield, right where the steering wheel is. It couldn't have been more centered, and we have a dowel showing where that bullet went. Sam had just exited the car 2 seconds ago, prior to the shot, knowing that I am in a fatal funnel. A windshield is a fatal funnel just like a door. He got out of the car, got into the protective via the door, bullet comes through the windshield and lodges right about, it would have been right here on him. That's where the dowel hits in the seat of the car. At 75 yards, he makes that shot. So I say that for the law enforcement in the room, a lot of times we get hung up on long guns. A lot of times we're worried about, oh, do they have a long gun? What do they have? Anyone who has a handgun and knows how to use it is just as deadly as anyone with a long gun. And this guy proved it over and over. And then Sam takes out the squad rifle and shoots him. And what he does is, and I have video, but I'm not going to be showing that today for time purposes. I'm going to be showing a short portion of video. But for the law enforcement, if you're wondering what it looks like when somebody hits, this video is out on the internet, someone in the structure. It's changed over 30 years. We used to have the double taps. We used to have all kinds of different training. He shoots him in the hip. Sam, being a selected marksman, I had asked him when I saw the video, I said, did you shoot at the head, Sam? Because he dropped like a tree. He said, nope, shot him in the hip. He was walking on an angle. It wasn't my rifle. In our department, we allow officers to carry their own rifles in the cars along with their squad rifles. So believe me, Sam's got one that's tricked out. And he didn't have it with him. So he said, I want to make sure I dropped it. So he hit him in the hip, and it ricocheted off the hip, went through the torso. It looks like a tree tipping over. And then he crawls and shoots himself in the head. He finds his gun after he went down, grabs his handgun, and then he kills himself. But that all took 6 minutes. There was a lot of things happening there. But it was those officers who, when we talk about leadership, were given some tools on that day. They were given those tools over a period of time. It didn't happen overnight. It started 20 years ago with trainings that we implemented and things like that, equipment we started giving them. So they were prepared and they were empowered to handle the situation. They didn't need a supervisor. He was down. That's the last thing in the world they needed, was to have to have approval to do anything. They needed to just act and move forward. We had 6 members of the Sikh Temple killed. 3 were wounded. Lieutenant Murphy shot 17 times, and Sam Linda's shot was fatal. He would have died within minutes, but he shot himself. I always put this slide up here because being a career trainer in law enforcement in our area, whenever we do training, and there's always officers who came to training, I'm sure anybody in here, someone may be going, oh, I don't want to be here today, or it's a way to get out of work. There's a reason we do training, and I always put up these faces because the training is about the people that we're out there protecting. We lost 6 members of our community that day, and we got there within 2.5 minutes, and we solved this problem in 6 minutes, got rid of it. We can do better, and I task my officers to do better. But these are people in our community. The 2 in the upper left and center, brothers, who walked out and offered the shooter as he walked into the lot, if he'd like to come into the church for a meal, put the gun up to him, shot them both almost simultaneously, and they fell on each other. The woman in the far right, she was in the temple praying. She was on her knees in the actual holy area. He walked up and executed her as he walked through. Gentleman in the lower left was the president of the temple. He tried to disarm the shooter as he came through the door, grabbed his hand, he tried to disarm him so he was able to allow some others to get free. He then took several rounds, went down, and all of the members of the Sikh Temple carry a ceremonial knife. It's called a kripan. And he pulled out his knife and crawled, trying to stab him in the feet, trying to stop him, just to do something. He then executed him. Gentlemen in the center is something that I talk about. If anyone here, if you do trainings for active shooter, what do you do in these drills? It's kind of things that we do. Joe and I were just talking about this. You must evolve. Your training must change as times change. Because you have a policy on it, you don't put it away. It's got to change with the times. What he did to this gentleman got into a room, locked himself in. What we saw the shooter do in this one was different than we'd seen before. He walked down a hallway. As he walked down the hallway, very quietly, as he got to a door, lightly rapped on the door. The gentleman in the center thought it was a member of the temple. Bless you. Thought it was a member of the temple trying to get in. opened the door, put the gun in his eye, shot him, and moved on to the next door. And we just slightly tap on the door, because he knew people do lockdowns. He knew it. They locked down. I'm going to find people in these rooms. So we need to evolve it. And the gentleman on the lower right, he was one of the priests who was in a temple room and couldn't get out. He was trapped in a room that had no doors, and he just cornered and he shot him. So I always put these up as a reminder. There's a reason we do the training. There's a reason we talk about these things, to try to implement them and try to empower the officers to do what they need to do to handle these situations. Because we lost 6 members of my community. I didn't lose anyone in my family. Nobody in my family died. Lieutenant Murphy recovered. He's now going all over speaking, and if you ever need someone to come speak again, you will be amazed at what he has to say. Something to keep in mind. You can find him on YouTube. He does a lot of motivational speaking right now. This is, I'm going to go past this, I'll bring it back later. This I just put up just to give you an idea in your area. I know Colorado Springs is a little bigger area, kind of equivalent to what we're looking at in Milwaukee. Milwaukee is our big city neighbor, and we're a suburb of Milwaukee. We have about 650,000 residents in Milwaukee, 2,000 person department, police department there. But this is what responded to my city. And in a city of our size, we have 11 patrolmen, 7 working that day, and all these people show up. In the upper right, you'll see it says Level 7 SMART. I'll just touch base on this. 20 years ago, the chiefs in our area got together and said, how can we do mutual aid better? How can we do something instead of getting on the horn and saying, hey, do you have a couple squads? Or somebody listening on the radio and say, I'm going to head over, they got something going. They put together a program called SMART, Suburban Mutual Aid Response Teams. They never realized what this would mean 20 years later. Every level gives you 5 officers. It's almost like dropping that pebble in the water and the rings start forming. It starts real close to you and it just works its way out. Every agency has signed an agreement in the Milwaukee and Waukesha counties, which are neighboring, that should there be a SMART call-up, we send on-duty people. We'll backfill and pay our own overtime. You need somebody now, we're not calling somebody in. We're sending the squads. Every level gets you 5 more. One of the officers on scene immediately called for a Level 7, knowing that 35 officers were going to show up within minutes in squads. And every officer in those 2 counties understands, I need to report to staging. You're given a pre-designated location, staging, and then given your assignment. So it's not chaos. It's just not bodies milling around. They go there and you can grab them and use them. So that's what we called for, 35. We ended up with 440. So somebody else got the message. Someone's tapped into our phone line or something. But, and that created quite a debate in our area about, do you respond or do you not respond when someone doesn't call for you? There was a big debate amongst the chiefs in the area. There were some chiefs saying, I'm going. If they don't need me, they can send me away. There was other chiefs, I will not go unless I get something in writing for mutual aid. I don't want you. Okay? That's my bottom line. So there was a great debate about us talking about that. At least we were talking about it. And it gives you an idea of what was all found there. And this went a long way to how we helped our community, because we used those bodies eventually on how we showed the community that it was safe for them to go out, and that we had contained this and it was done. And when we did our press conference, it was huge on how we prepared the community for it. I'm going to talk a little bit about the concepts. Some of this stuff here, normally when I do these presentations, it's mostly the law enforcement. I'm going to do my best not to swear. I can't promise anything, and if I offend anyone, well, I'm trying. I'm really trying. But normally, anybody who wants to ask a question, I usually say, go ahead. I know we're going to go through and save questions for the end. But if there's something really pressing, you don't want to forget about that, I run through, throw up your hand right away, and I'll grab it. I want to talk about some of the concepts that we went through as far as leadership, how the community came together after a critical incident. Notifying employees. How do you do that? It may seem like a real simple thing. How do you notify employees? Here we were. I was out at the scene. I was actually the first commander on the scene. I lived 3 blocks from the Sikh Temple. I was driving my daughter, who had just rented an apartment, to get a couch that we found. And we were driving past the temple when I got stopped by a sheriff's car. And I said, what in the hell is a sheriff's deputy doing in my city blocking off the street. That's not how it works in Wisconsin. I don't know how it works here. You probably ask the same thing, what the hell are you doing? No. But, so I immediately called in and found out what was happening, and I was in there right away. But then you get pulled in so many directions and asked so many things. It felt like an octopus. Everybody's pulling, everybody wants something, everybody wants you for this, 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 or this. How do you notify your employees? And when I say employees, I look at it as my family. First my law enforcement family, then I have my support staff, which are dispatchers, clerical, I have maintenance, I have cleaning personnel. They're my family. They should not find out about this through media reports or anything like that. They should find out from me what's going on. Then it extends even farther to our city hall, our public works. How are we going to notify them what's going on? And you may go, yeah, not a big deal, we'll get to it eventually. Believe me, it can bring headaches to you that you never thought of if you don't think about these things. So we sent out an all-page to everybody at pagers right away, letting them know the condition of Brian, he's okay, and what happened as much as we could without giving up the investigation. And then we made phone calls to the rest. I assigned someone just to make phone calls to the people in our department who were either dispatchers not working, officers not working, clerical, maintenance, cleaning staff, and talk to them. And that's how, when I put that up, think of your organization as a family. It kind of goes out, that's how we treat it. It is a family. How would you want members of your family notified? Would you want them to find out, I was involved in a shooting. Worst thing in the world was when my family heard about it on the radio and they said my name. When I was shot and I was in the hospital. Instead of being notified first. It's the worst thing. And then they just start thinking the worst, what's going on. And then they get mad. They want to, they're upset about it in the first place, so they need to take it out on somebody. So think of your organization as a big family. Families fight. That's what happens. Within an organization, you may fight, but at the end of the day, they're still your family. You need to make sure it all goes right. And continue this with every bit of release of information that's going to happen. Now, again, these are what we did. I'm not saying it's the best, it's the practice we used, and it worked well for us. You may have different thoughts on that. When I say that, the press release that we gave out, everybody knew pretty much what we were going to talk about. Then the media comes down and wants squad video. They want video. They want something they can put out. They want to talk to people who were in the video. At some point, we can't hold the video, and we have to release it. When we were ready to release the video, when it was all said and done, and we couldn't keep it anymore, we went to every roll call first. First of all, we showed it to the officers who were at the scene, separate. They went into a separate room, watched the video. Very emotional for them to watch that. Then we showed it at the roll calls, every roll call. Then we showed it to the dispatchers, cleaning personnel, maintenance. I didn't go as far as City Hall. I stayed within my building. Made sure everyone there would get that. And then we released it. I wouldn't release it until they all got a chance to see it. Because I felt they deserved that. They're part of the family, they need to see it. And there were officers who were very upset with this. Why does everyone get to see this? I'm on this video. It's going out. They're going to see it on the news, and people in the media are going to make their own comments about it. They need to hear it and ask questions of us when we show it. That's how and we've done that on several occasions, officer-involved shootings that we've had. That's how we do it if we're going to release a video. We do it the same way. Now, there's some video I'm going to show you today at the very end. It's very short. This video has never been released. Has never been put out. And it's going to, it shows you leadership in a very different way. And it's of Lieutenant Brian Murphy. When we did the officer rescue, the officers who went out there and did that excellent job handling the situation. Didn't miss a beat, always moving. Ran and did an officer rescue, which we trained twice a year. We put them on a clock twice a year. Officer rescue, civilian rescue. There's video of him being pulled into the back of the car. You're going to see a man who's shot 17 times. You're going to see probably what you don't think you're going to see. You're going to see somebody who's in the game, talking. What you're not going to see is someone screaming, begging for, I'm going to die, help me. It's someone who has a mindset of survival and leadership. Because by just doing that alone, psychologically what it did for those officers was amazing. Just by how he handled himself in this process. And I'll talk a little bit about that. External preparing for the media. I know that 2 weeks prior to our shooting, they had the Aurora shooting. So it was 2 weeks to the day They had the Aurora shooting, and then we had ours. And what does the media do? The national media, they just jump from one to the other. They go looking for wherever they can. And the media, the national media, doesn't care. They're only there a short time. They're going to fill in the blanks. They're going to dig for the next story or the next thing that's sensational because they're all there. CNN, Fox, NBC, everybody's there and they want the exclusive. So they're going to dig. They're going to find stuff. One of the first interviews I did was with a news media out of India. They came from India. They're national TV. They have like one major station. Sent a reporter. Started the interview, and it was a kick in the pants to me how this interview started. I hadn't prepared for this. Basically said, first question to me, now, because this guy was a military trained person, said, now that it's proven that your country trained your military to be murderers, how do you respond to that? That was the question I got right out of the box. I looked down at her, and I said, well, first of all, you do realize that Lieutenant Murphy's a Marine. And I did make the mistake once of calling him an ex-Marine. He corrected me. I'll never do that again. So I said, he's a Marine. And he saved, I don't know how many lives, and he's lying in a hospital fighting for his life right now. This interview's over. And I walked away. And I would never talk to anyone from that organization again. I wouldn't do it. But it was one of those that they're going to ask all these questions, anything they can, to be sensational. And not just that you don't prepare just for that day or the day after. My former chief had prepared us for this day for 20 years. He sent all of his command to PIO school. We all had been through the training on how to deal with the media and to feed the beast. And he had a policy. If they want to call and ask about the new dog collar that's out there, how does it affect your city? We will talk to them. Because the more you give them now, a little bit, when the shit hits the fan, they're going to be your friends, the local media. And we found that to be true. They came in and they treated us with kid gloves, said, hey, you guys have always been great to us. We're just going to get what we need. National media, not so much. They will dig everything. We did kind of a side story. CNN, if you believe it, if you guys think CNN is everything's true on what they put out there, they had a reporter dig into Sam Linda's history. Sam Linda has an earth home that he built in the ground. And we always say if the zombie apocalypse happens, we're going to Sam's house. 18 inches of concrete, underground, earth over it. Yeah, that's Sam. And he's got some windows on one side. There was a report done about him in the paper when he built his home 20-some years ago, 25 years ago. They dug it up. They found the address because somebody had released, they record all your audio, all these streaming internet that pick up all the police bands. The next day they released their police tapes. And I was getting calls, why did you release the audio? I hadn't released anything. But they heard his badge number, they researched it, found out who that was applied to. They then found his address. A CNN reporter showed up at his door. Biggest mistake of his life. He showed up at Sam's house, and then the next day at a press conference with the FBI, wanted to file a complaint with me on how he was treated when he showed up at Sam's house. I said, you showed up at Sam's house? And he goes, yeah. I said, what happened? He goes, well, it's kind of weird. I walked down this driveway, and there's not a house. And I'm walking over this thing, and it gets a little higher and higher. It's a mound. Well, he's walking on top of his house. And Sam's got ports. I call them ports. They're windows. And Sam said he picked him up. He saw the guy coming around his house. He didn't know who he was. Here he had just shot a white supremacist. The white supremacist had just shot one of our officers and committed this crime. We didn't know if there'd be retaliation, what might happen. So we were all on alert for that. He walks all the way around, comes to Sam's front door, knocks on the door, opens the door, and Sam is standing there with one of the shotguns that Sam has that it doesn't look like a shotgun. It looks like something out of, you ever seen Men in Black when they open that wall and there's all those weird weapons and all? And the guy almost pissed himself. And so Sam told him, you better leave now. So the guy wanted to file a complaint, and then Sam made the call. We had 5 squads, took the camera, searched these guys, everything to figure out who they were. He was upset on how we treated him and how Sam treated him. And so I made the point, I said, just so you understand, I really wasn't all that worried about Sam. And a light bulb went off in his head. And he started sweating. And he said, well, why? Why would you do that? I said, well, same thing, white supremacists, this and that. We have no threats, we have nothing. What's the next headline to appear in CNN within the next half hour? Oak Creek police have death threats from white supremacists. Officers guarded. That was the article that CNN, the headline they put out within a half hour. I'm pretty sure he lost his job because I called him on it at a press conference and he couldn't answer it. All the other media was laughing at him. Again, prepare, you need to prepare ahead of time. Prepare with the local media. National media, everybody was there. I went from, who's the little guy? Anderson Cooper to Kelly, who's his counterpart right after him? Morgan? I don't watch the channel. And he is this tall. He is this tall. They would not let him and I be on the same screen together. They did a split screen, so we couldn't have him standing next to me. And when he talked like this, like he was looking in my eyes. And when it cut to me, I was like this. It's all kind of weird stuff that happens. I could have held him like this. And I just got to say on a side note, best interview I did with anybody, no matter what you think of the person, Geraldo Rivera. He is so pro-police, at least he was with me, on what he had to say in praise of our officers and the job they did. It was the best interview I'd ever done anywhere on anything, and it was fantastic. Beyond the media, you need to know what your message is to the community, and this is where it gets tough for the community, because if you're silent, those blanks get filled in by the media, and your community believes that's what's true. So you have to notify your community next. And what we did in Oak Creek, you know, it's a small town. I've been there my entire life. I've worked for that agency. Next week will be my 30th anniversary. The mayor and I played ball when we were in high school, and out of high school, fishing trips, him and I still go on. So before I was a cop, before he was in politics, we're best friends. The fire chief was my brother's age, played ball with him, was in high school with him. I used to drink with him years ago before we were cops or firefighters. So we are a very close-knit community. So if you hear me making firefighter jokes, believe me, we have a great relationship, and I always give him shit just like I would you here. So it's nothing personal. So we're very close-knit. One of the best thing that happened was one of the national media came to me, a PIO from a federal agency, a federal agency pulled me aside. And I knew him, and I had a good relationship with him. He actually pulled me aside, and he said, John, I'm going to tell you something. Don't let anybody in this room take your press conference. This is your city. We're all leaving. It's yours. Make sure you send the message. Your citizens have to see it. Best advice I could ever get. Because that's what was trying to be done in the room. We had everybody ready for the first press conference, and it was trying to be taken over. And after I was told that, I went to the mayor. I said, here's the deal. You're speaking first. You're going to tell them the faith you have in the police department, the good job that we did, and that we're working on everything that needs to be done. If anyone has any questions, I'll get up, I'll tell them what we did to make them safe, and they're okay. And we will keep that message all the way through for the rest of this period of time. He looked at me, and my mayor is he owns his own marketing company, and he's a communications major. Made it much easier. He looked at me and said, got it. We never had to talk again. We did side-by-side interviews. He told me, I will never say anything that has to do with law enforcement or fire service. I don't know it, so I won't speak to it. I will refer to you guys. I will talk about community events. That's it. So we had a really good understanding on how that was going to work. So when we had that first press conference, when I showed all those people who responded, we told them how we did a grid search with those 400 officers of 2 square miles, because we had reports of 5 shooters and 40 people dead at first. So that's what we were dealing with. And so it gets so crazy with all these social media, because people inside the temple were texting family members who were then calling media and telling them what they were hearing. So it was so convoluted. And then what you get after that is the conspiracy theories. What happened to the 5 shooters? There never were any. Oh yeah, sure. You know, there is actually a blog out there that says I created the entire Sikh Temple shooting. I murdered everybody, and I set it up because I want to take everybody's guns away. It was my end goal was to do that. Which if they would know me, that's furthest from the truth. I don't believe in banning any weapons, whether that anyone disagrees or agrees. That's my thoughts. So it happens very quickly. So we said that message, we did a 2-mile search, we told them what it was, and the very next day was our national night out. It was amazing to me, because we were going to cancel it. We were going to cancel our national night out, because we didn't have any people. Everybody was doing all kinds of stuff as far as security for the FBI scene. We were still, we had officers out. And we decided to hold it. It was the best thing we ever did. City of 35,000, basically. We probably had 10,000 people show up at our national night out. If we get 1,000 every year, that's pretty good. In and out, we had 10,000 show up. All of them wearing Sikh headbands as they came. And then we had a candlelight vigil. The governor showed up. And unfortunately, it was an election year. We had a recall election going in our state for the governor. We had all kinds of city. It was a presidential election. The president was supposed to be at each and every one of these events, but wouldn't tell us which ones he was coming, but we were going to be tasked with providing security locally. So those are the things you had to deal with. The other thing we did, the Sikh community, I've never seen anything like it. I didn't know much about them. That's my fault. Any of you in here who have different cultures, things in your communities, you need to know who they are, what they're all about. Just because you drive past it. We have an Egyptian Coptic church in our city. It's the only one in Wisconsin. The leader of that church is on the Al-Qaeda hit list. So we work with the Fusion Center and FBI on a daily basis and with that church as far as security. Every event they have, we have officers there. We know everything going on. We know any credible threats that are coming through every single day. When the Sikh community came in, we offered them the same, only because we understood that after 9/11, they were mistook for terrorists, and there was a lot of crime against the Sikh community. They turned us down and said, no, we're fine. We didn't know, I should have pushed. Should have pushed a little harder. In India, they distrust the police. They told me, after this all happened, so why did you guys, we offered, we would have been here, we would have had more things in place. They said, in India, if the police show up at your house, and this is what he told me, one of the elders, said, they're coming to take your shit. They show up, and your stuff's gone. They can take all your stuff out of your house and just leave. They have no trust. So they had none of that. And the elders run the church. And most of them are right over from India. So what we did the very next day, the mayor and I, Sunday was a shooting, we had the press conference. The mayor and I left the press conference, went over to a private building without media, anyone else, with elders from the church. And one thing we had going really well for us was there was a member of the FBI team that was there. He was a member of the Sikh Temple, and his father was an elder. So he came with us. It worked out really well. And we let them ask us all the questions they wanted. Any tough questions about why did the bodies stay out so long? They don't understand evidence collection and taking the pictures and the medical examiner rules. They wanted questions because they have certain religious things that have to be done. We let them ask us questions that were very difficult to answer. We made them promises. We listed a list of promises. To this day, we've met every one of them. So we solidified with that Sikh community. We didn't just blow smoke. We talked to them, we made promises, and the mayor made promises to them. One of the things he did is he created this Oak Creek community of summit of community leaders. And we meet quarterly. I think it's more than that, actually. It includes every religious organization in our city of a member, schools, private sector, members of our Lions, people like that, our Oak Creek Community Center, member of City Hall, and then we get together. We say, what can we do for the community? How can we make it better? What are some things we need to look at? He created an Oak Creek Cares Foundation, which is donations that are private donations, so it doesn't come out of our city budget for taxpayers, that is used for security and safety within the city. So if a neighborhood needs better lighting, they can go to this Oak Creek Cares, ask, we'd like to do this. And they have to fill out a form, and the grant money can be then given to this. They have to show what they're going to do, how they're going to use it, so it doesn't come out of city coffers. He started off communities in the city. I think we have about 250, 300,000 in there right now for us. For us, that's huge for us to be able to distribute that to different things. Parks, can we get cameras at our parks? We can't afford it, but maybe we'll pay for it out of here. So those are some of the things we did with the community to bring them together and work with us really well. And I do say, if you ever go to a Sikh temple, and they have tea, that's very addicting. So if you go there, be prepared to get addicted to their Tai Chi. I don't know what they put in it. It's not the stuff you buy at the store. My officers now, That's one of their, we don't have substations, but that is one of their substations. They'll go there, do their reports in the parking lot. They form such a great relationship with the Sikh community on how they responded. I've never seen people who, in all my time in law enforcement, handling murders of children, when you have to interview someone, when I was in the detective bureau, you just want to jump over the table and rip their throat out, but you got to get what you need to convict them. And victims wanting an eye for an eye. Give me a minute in the room alone with that person, those kind of things. And in law enforcement, we felt that way too, many times. They came to me the day that on Sunday when it was so chaotic. They actually pulled me aside, and I was prepared for a lot of questions. Their question to me was, how are you? How are you doing? How are the officers? That's what they asked. They didn't ask about their families. They didn't ask about the dead bodies, anything. They asked how we were doing. I had never had victims ever come to me without anger and revenge in their mind and ask me how I was doing at a scene. It was amazing. It takes the wind out of your sails. They're a very compassionate people, but they consider themselves warriors. I've never met a more compassionate group of individuals at the funeral. Their religion does not allow for fancy funerals. But because it was a political year, we held a funeral at our high school for all the 6 members of it in our gymnasium. It was, and they didn't like it. They didn't want this. What they wanted a 7th casket. They wanted a 7th casket for the shooter and an American flag draped over that casket because he served in the military. Can you imagine that when they said, this is what we want? And here are the victims, we're trying to help, and here's what they need. We're like, wow, how do you deal with this? We had the funeral director there. We finally talked them out of it. And we convinced them that it probably wouldn't be the best thing. We understand it. But they said, we hold no ill will towards him. He's where we're all going to be. We'll see him again. He's done with this life. I'd never seen anything like it. It was just amazing. So you can't do anything but want to work with them and help. And if you have people like that in your community, and if you don't know them, that's the things. I didn't know anything about them. That's my fault. I should have known. Some of the things I want to talk about real quick are some of the internal concepts and training. And that's what I talked about a little bit about our chief prior to me. Policies in place, train them. I put up there, we all have policies. We all have procedures. And listening to the general talk, it brought back to me. I hear the term manager used. My concern in my department was that I was training a bunch of managers as far as sergeants, lieutenants. It's easy to be a manager. It's easy to look at policy. It's easy to look at procedure and say, here's how you do it. It's easy to wait a month and then look at numbers and go, well, why didn't you do it this way? That's a manager. I need people in my organization to lead. Leading is dealing with individuals. In my mind, you have to deal with an individual to be a leader. And that's hard because you now need to know what they're all about, what makes them work, what makes them click. So that's the thing I try to instill in my sergeants. You are not a manager. One thing we did this year, we had about as close to a, what you call quotas as you could. They're illegal in Wisconsin. What we had was you had to write so many tickets, you had to have so many contacts, and that's what we had for years. And it just wasn't right, so we gave it to the officers. We said, okay, give us something different. How would you like us to measure productivity? They came up with a program with formulas based on shift activity on a percentage. And that every shift, depending on how much activity there is, that's where it's not a set number, it's all flowing. And then we said, guess what? I don't even want you to be average. Here's 100% of the shift average. If you give me 80%, I'm happy. Give me 80% of that shift average, because you got the one guy who's always, we got a canine guy, I can't keep up with him. He chases everything and he's making arrests everywhere. But then there's someone else who maybe might take a little longer in investigations or things like that. We want them to be more well-rounded. So they get, I actually tell them, I don't even need you to be average today. Just come in and give me 80% and we're good. That still causes problems, which causes problems for me because I have a problem when I tell someone you can come to work today to be below average and they have a problem with that. That tells me where they're at. So what I did this year, I listened to them. There was a lot of people who caused anxiety. So I got rid of it. We have an annual meeting every year, and it used to be where we'd read statistics, and here's what we had for calls and all this other stuff. When I became chief, I said, boy, that was boring. That really sucked. And then it was the year 2012 where we had the shooting, and I said, nobody wants to hear statistics. So we made it more of a, what I did is I've been asked to speak in a lot of different places around the country, especially in 2013, and I found out that people want to pay you. They want to give you money to speak, which is kind of weird for me. So what I did is my captains and I, we went around and talked. We said, we want no money. If you'd like to make a donation into this account, into the Oak Creek Police Department, you can do that. And I would get checks from different places. And then I took all that money and I went out and I bought TVs, iPads, trips to our water parks up in the Dells, Wisconsin Dells, big place, some hotel parks, restaurants. At our annual meeting, after I told them what they needed to hear on insurance changes and everything else, I did a raffle and handed out door prizes. I wanted to end the year on something positive. So we do that every year now. We do that every single year. That's how we end the annual meeting. They don't need to hear the statistics. But what it does do, that leads to your supervisors. I just put so much more work on my sergeants and my lieutenants because they are used to waiting at the end of a month, pulling up the numbers, and going, oh, let's talk to so-and-so, let's talk to so-and-so. And I said, you no longer can do that. You now have to know your people. You now have to talk to them. You need to be a leader. I don't want to leave here in 10 years created a bunch of managers. I want leaders. That's what we need in the police department. So that's how we handle that. When I say conceptually and practically, how many here are in city government? Okay. You guys, by us we have EOCs, emergency operations centers. I don't know if you have that here. Usually it's department heads and things like that who are depending on whatever position it is. And I'm not sure how often you train it. Pardon me?
A lot.
A lot?
Yes.
Okay. That's good. That's good because when it happens isn't the time to go, what the hell do I do with this? I'm the planning section chief. I'm not really sure what I do. Who can I ask? It's very important. ICS saves your ass. It's one of those things when everybody hears it and go, oh, tabletop. I'm going to do a tabletop today. And what do? You prepare 3 months for a tabletop so everybody can be ready for it. But in reality, when it happens, you don't have that tabletop prep. You need to know what you're going to do. Our chief prior to me sent every sergeant and above down to Texas for the incident command school. Every supervisor goes through it. It puts you through every bit of incident command that you can go through. If you don't plan for it, they will do it. Say you're planning a big area where you have a fire. If you don't plan for it, they'll crash a helicopter in your scene. So it teaches you ICS and how to plan for things. It's fantastic. We also implemented with our officers back in the early 90s. If they went to a dog crapping in my yard complaint, they had to call out command. I have command. We got them on board because the fire service had this down a long time ago. They had incident command down a long time ago. And so we did the same, so we were both on the same page. And it makes it, they know I do not turn over command unless someone takes it from me. So we have a whole generation of cops who understand incident command and know what to do with it. And that's not all that common in law enforcement. It's not the norms. But as far as conceptually and practically, when you do these tabletops, you need to ask those tough questions. You give out those assignments and someone says, I'm going to get 30 porta potties. Okay, where are you finding a number to call them? How are they being transported? Who's going to meet them? Who's going to put them out? And who's going to get it out to everyone where they're at? Those are the practically. That is, conceptually, it's easy. It's easy to say what you're going to do, but you have to plan for it. We also, after the Sikh Temple, created positional binders for every ICS position. Because what we had was all of our supervisors were eaten up very quickly. We had no bodies. They were all over the place. So what we found was people not understanding ICS from other agencies that showed up weren't as well trained as our patrol officers who we had in other assignments. So what we did is we created these, I like to call them ICS for dummies, like the computers for dummies. It's basically a checklist. We made it ourselves. We went through, put it in, and if anyone shows up, I don't care if they send me a clerk, a dispatcher, that they just give me a body, I can hand them the planning section binder, say, open it up, start at the beginning. We'll get you somebody to take it over. I need you to get moving. And they'll tell them where to start, what to do, who they report to. It's a checklist. Very simple. And until you get someone to take it over, because what hurts you the most is the wheels spinning in the mud. Take forever to get, once you get those wheels out of the mud, it helps you a great deal. And again, don't wait for major incidents to implement training and equipment. If you're thinking of something, you're planning for it, use other people's situations or critical incidents to get the stuff that you need. Don't wait for it to happen. In 2004, we've been asking for a TEMS unit, Tactical Emergency Medical Service, on our SWAT team. The fire chief fought us, said, nope, not going to happen. We had the active shooter in the hotel. The fire chief walked up to us as we were pulling the guy out and walking him out in cuffs. You know that TEMS thing? I think that would be something we need to look at. Because we took 2 firemen up into the 3rd floor where the bodies were, with a shield, provided cover, and got the people out to get them treated who were still wounded. And we caught hell because it wasn't safe. And that was a problem. We ran into the same thing. We then got the TEMS unit, but then at the Sikh Temple, we had 2 firefighters, one 4 months, one 6 months. When they called for them to come up, they pulled up right up to where they brought Brian Murphy, went in, got him out. And right now when we talk about rescue task force and things like that, it's very critical that you get someone who's in one of these situations treated within 6 to 10 minutes, or you're going to lose them. You're going to die, you're going to lose more bodies. From the time he was shot till the time those paramedics showed up, we got him in the back and they started working on him, exactly 6 minutes. That's how quick we got him in. Those 2 paramedics were vilified by the union because they went into an unsafe area. Since then, we've worked with our fire department, and I think it's been across the country. It's a movement to get fire and police working together on these rescue task force. We need to get in there together so they can treat, we can protect, and we can get the bodies out. To me, it's the same as when we had, after Columbine, it changed the world of policing. It used to be a tactical problem. After Columbine, there was a debate. Is it tactical or is it patrol? And I remember people on both sides. I know, and we all know now, it is a patrol problem. For the fire service, it's just going to be one of those things where it's going to take a little bit of time to get used to that and get out of what their norm is. And I'm one of those that believe you can bitch and moan, point fingers, or you can fix it. You burn a lot of energy bitching and moaning. You really do. Fixing it works a lot better and it saves a lot more lives. So you need to work on those things. Leadership. Again, what the general was talking about. Leadership styles. You know, there's books out there. And I know when we do interviews, you know, for promotions, it always irritates me when someone tells me their leadership, oh, I'm going to use this or I'm going to use that. I'm a firm believer, especially after the Sikh Temple, really understanding where I came from in my career. You cannot pick and choose a leadership style. It doesn't work that way because you liked it in the book. Oh, it looked good, worked good, I'm going to pick it. It doesn't work that way. Everybody's different. Everybody responds different. I truly believe leadership will find you. It will find you. And really, what is that based on? It's based on hard work, dedication, and doing your job. Doing what you're supposed to do. And you can't be ignored. And leadership will find you if you do that. And that's what I've been pushing with my supervisors. You need to be leaders. That's what you need to be, not managers. But leadership will find you. And some people aren't leaders. It's just the way it is. They have different roles. And that's one of the most important things. One of the things is we used to promote for performance. Oh, this guy made a lot of arrests. She did a lot of this. She was always in here doing that. That doesn't equate to being promoted. We should always promote for potential. We always look at, if I'm promoting a sergeant, that's my next lieutenant. If I'm promoting a lieutenant, that's my next captain in chief. They have to have the potential. Performance is no basis for this kind of, when you're looking at a leadership role, it's not something to look at that I've seen. And we're very shocked when all of a sudden they do shitty. Wow, they were so good. What happened? It's because they weren't ready for it. They had a role. We took them out of their role. The role that they needed to be in to be successful. Promote for potential. And know your role is huge. On that day at the Sikh Temple, everybody knew their role. Lieutenant Murphy knew his role. Lieutenant Murphy was shot immediately. He's laying on the ground, and he's dodging bullets. He says he's moving around. Both his legs were shot, both his arms through the biceps, through the arms, and through his femur, or through his thighs. And he didn't hit the bone. But he said it was like my torso was trying to move it. At one point he turned, tried to protect his back with his vest. That's when he shot him in the back of the head. Brian Murphy did a couple things. He knew his role. Not only was he a leader, he's also a hero. And sometimes in law enforcement we throw that term around way too much. Way too much. And it's a heavy burden to hold for someone that shouldn't have it, and they know they shouldn't have it. But as far as what Brian did, while he was laying there, he said, I knew how I would survive this. He was thinking consciously. If I could keep him 10 feet away, I stand a good chance of surviving this because I don't want him to walk up and just put it in the top of my head and finish me off. So I just kept looking at him. He says, I looked him straight in the eye. I never screamed. I never begged for mercy. I stared him down. I wanted him to think, that son of a bitch will kill me if I come near him. He said, that was my mindset as I was staring in his eyes. And he stayed 10 feet away or more. Did it help? Not sure, but Brian's alive. One of the other things that happened is he was being shot, and he then, as this was going on, he said everything started getting real cloudy. Everything went quiet. Couldn't hear anything. You could see the muzzle flash. Couldn't hear anything. Very warm. He's military trained. He's a lot of law enforcement trained. He knew what it was. He was bleeding out. He was dying with all the blood. The officers who arrived said they'd never seen so much blood flowing around a live human being before as they approached him. So what he did was, I taught DARE for 5 years. You know, the autogenic breathing to teach the kids how to reduce stress, hold it in, let it out, real simple thing that we taught kids. We did that in our roll calls. It may sound goofy, and make the supervisor shut the lights off. Let's do a little bit of, we call it combat breathing now, it's changed over the years. Do a little bit of breathing, and then go on a roll. And someone think, wow, that's what they do? That's what they're doing? Brian remembered it. Brian remembered it, so he said, I have to reduce my heart rate. I'm going to bleed to death. He shook off that feeling, started doing his autogenic breathing. He said, the feeling came back, second time, even stronger. He said, John, if I could plug it into your head, you'd close your eyes and go to sleep. That's how good it felt. He said he was sitting there, and then he heard Sam Linda's voice saying, drop the gun, drop the gun. He knew this was over. He knew the guy was done because Sam was there. And he had trust. And, you know, Sam, he trusted him what he was going to do. He then said, okay, he left me, he went to Sam. He shook it off. He started doing his breathing again. But here's the thing that really shows leadership and being a hero. What he did, knowing his role on that day, was I started doing the breathing again, but for another reason. Yeah, I had to reduce my heart rate, but I knew the officers were coming. I could hear them. They could not see me panicked. They could not see their lieutenant upset or panicked when they showed up. Well, that's amazing to me, that he has that mindset. Officers ran up to him. He's laying there in a mess. He looks up, and with it, he had a real hoarse voice, and you're going to hear it on the video. I'll show it to you. He says, I'm fine. Get in the temple. That was his command to the officers. Okay, that's what puts him into the hero category for me. But as far as a leader, if you can imagine what that does for the psyche of the officers responding, how can they not do their job? How can they not do what they're supposed to do when this guy's laying here shot to pieces, bleeding to death, and he's saying, get in there. What are you guys waiting for? Luckily, I like to think I have very intelligent officers. They realized he wasn't fine, and they effected a rescue on him, and then they dealt with the problem. But that psychological effect on those officers was, you can't get in a book. You can't find that in a book. So then what he does is, you're going to see him in the back of the car answering questions, giving a description of the shooter, taking his deep breaths, still breathing. And again, the officer who was in the back cutting his vest off, psychologically what that does for him is amazing. I mean, there's just no words to describe it. Other people at that scene knew their roles. Sam Linda, he shot the shooter. Then what he did is he formed up. He then provided cover for the officer rescue. He then formed up two-person teams to clear every car in that parking lot prior to getting into that building. They didn't stop. They didn't miss a beat. They knew their roles. We had to get this job done. We don't have supervisors. Let's just get this done. And they did it because we empowered them with it. We gave them those abilities. And you don't do them to failure if you don't trust and empower those people who get the job done on the lower levels. They don't need me. They don't need me. And it doesn't mean saying it's not my job. It doesn't mean if you're not the person in charge, it's not my job, and I'll talk about that real quick. But they knew their roles. Here's some of the things I talked about already. The officers did all this. They did it without any direction. They just handled it. And that was from the leadership we had years prior, planning and preparing the officers for this. Brian couldn't make decisions, but he led. He absolutely led by his actions. They did need supervisors. What they needed that day, training, knowledge, and equipment. And we had given that to them years prior, starting 20 years ago. We were the first in Milwaukee County to get squad rifles. I remember asking for it as a lead use of force trainer. and being told by the mayor over my dead body. Then the North Hollywood shooting happened. Guess what we got? Mayor came and said, hey, I don't want to ever see this happen. You guys need those still? Yeah. And there again, asterisk, we always wait for an event before we get stuff. We wait too long. You're always behind the 8 ball. So they needed confidence in themselves that day, and they had it because we empowered them to do it, handle the problem. They do it on a daily basis. That's why I took away this numbering system for productivity. Every time I give them something, they knock it out of the park. When we gave them, hey, give us a better system, we have the best system that I've ever seen. Every community in our area copied it. And it was by the officers who did it. So why would I not trust them to do what they need to do? Yeah, I agree with the general. You got to monitor. You trust, but you got to monitor and make sure you monitor the right things. And on August 5th, that's the day I understood my role. I love being a cop. I loved it. I love being a cop. Being a chief, the first part of it, I was very new to this. I didn't know my role. I was kind of floundering a little bit, dealing with some politicians, city officials. What do I do? How do I handle this? Realizing that day, I am not a cop anymore. I wear the uniform every day, but I am not a cop. I am a support system. I am support for those officers to get them everything they need to make sure they survive every single day, no matter what the media says or what people give them. That's my job now, and I've embraced it. And it made my job a lot easier once I understood my role. I will fight the council members as much as I need to get what we need. I don't have a problem being told no, but I know an election's coming. I might have a new alderman. Guess what? I'm coming back. I was told no. I don't tell the officers no ever. He said, let's go. Although I have been, in our area, I have been asked for the helicopter and the submarine. It's kind of off limits. It's all within reason. So for me, that's when I understood my role that day. And I'm going to probably go a little over, but employee well-being, the general talked about a little bit. Suicides are horrible. You need to understand who is involved. Usually an officer-involved shooting, it's the officer who pulls the trigger, the officer who shot. That's what we deal with. I failed my officers that day horribly because by the end of the day, after going through all that crap, my officers who were at that scene, some of them who had the blood of their lieutenant still on them, were still out there. I did not get them out soon enough. We're not a big agency. We don't have bodies to just keep filling in. And some wouldn't leave. Some would refuse to leave. I should have gotten them out sooner. I went to the hospital. We finally got them out of there. They were all sitting in the ICU unit where Brian was undergoing surgery. The entire shift was there. Some was still crusted in his blood. I looked at them. They weren't there. Looked in their eyes, and they were not there. And that's when the light bulb went off in my head and said, oh, what did I do? I left them. They needed to be out of here. Called the sergeant, had never even thought about it. I said, all of these people are off until they can come back to work. They're off work. And then I talked to them individually. I said, maybe you can't be off for 2 to 5 years. You know, we want you to get some help and see somebody. Some of them were back the next day or 2 days. And I said, if you need more time, ask me. Only 2 came up to me and asked. I said, I need more time, I can't. One was one of our female officers who was just through a divorce. She knew I had been through a shooting. She knew I had been diagnosed with PTSD after my shooting. She came up to me and she said, Chief, when does it stop? I said, never. You now have this for the rest of your life. But there are professionals out there who can help you deal with it, give you a plan on how to monitor it, so you can lead a normal life. She said, I can't afford it. We had just gone to a deductible that was $4,000 a year. She was newly divorced, single mother. Called the mayor. Said, Mayor, here's what we got. He says, tell them all to go, we're paying for everything. But you know what? I should have known that. Who's paying for what? Well before this. Because the anxiety it caused those officers not knowing who's going to pay for what just compounded the problem. So plan. Those are some of the things. Who's paying for something like this if it happens? Do you have an EAP? And if you do have an EAP, I tell you to use caution with that. Understand what it offers. Understand what it's used for. It may not be the best solution. It's easy to say it, but then when they find out, they get 3 visits or 4 visits. One is, who are you? Next is, what's the problem? Third is, you better find a new counselor. That doesn't help. Okay? EAPs, when I went through a divorce, my daughters, we went to it. That's what they're for. They're not for these types of situations. There's other professionals who understand police types of situations that you need to get them to. Don't offer EAP if you're not sure what it offers to those people. You will do more damage. And I want to read this as the last slide for you guys. Recognizing timidity and accepting it are two different things. A law enforcement leader may be haunted in their next position, and I was going to change this to community leader because of the audience, but the person who wrote, I think it applies across the board, so I'm going to read it as is. A law enforcement leader may be haunted in their next position or upon retirement if their present organization fails to perform adequately during a future critical incident. In essence, the leader has escaped after their watch, but failed in the duty and responsibility to prepare others to respond. There is not a retirement community shielded enough to rest at if one of their past employees should be impacted by inadequately prepared supervisors, partners, or insufficient training. Tom Bauer was my former chief. He wrote that for a master's thesis back in 2007. Wow, did that really come true? When he called me up, he said, John, I know you're going to be asked to speak. This is something you should talk about. He said, basically, when I wrote this, I was thinking, people can't go fishing. If you're in a position of authority, you don't get to go fishing unless everybody's prepared for the next step. First thing I said to him was, Tom, go fishing. Shut up. That's all I mean. I go, no, you get to go fishing. You're the one who put in place all of these things, starting 20 years ago, that allowed these people to succeed at the Sikh Temple. And I say this to everybody, I say this at every presentation. If you are a decision maker, you have that authority in your organization, whatever it is, and you're one of those people who, when they come into your office and they say, hey, what do you think about this? What about this idea? And one of your standard responses is, not going to happen. They won't go for it. Forget about it. Make this your last conference. Never go to another conference. Quit your jobs. Go do something else. And let someone else take over. Because you're doing a disservice to whatever organization you're in. It works the other way too. If you're one of those frontline people who have said, not my job, it's not my pay grade, I don't get paid to make those decisions, make this your last conference also, quit your job, because you're doing the same disservice. Because on August 5th, nobody cared about stripes, bars, stars, anything else. They had a job, and they had a mission, and they completed it. Nobody cared who was in charge. It doesn't work that way. Your family. Get it done, talk about it later. So I truly, I'd like to take some questions, if there are any, on any parts of what we did with the city. The one thing I didn't mention, I don't know if there's aldermen in here or not, but we had two aldermen who happened to talk to the media and never should have opened their mouths. They basically asked them questions. They knew nothing. They were at the city hall completely unaware of what was going on and answered specific questions about this shooting. That later we had to try and put out those fires because they had no knowledge. So when I talk about that message, you need to make sure that whoever's going to speak is speaking. So I spoke and the mayor spoke, nobody else. And usually we did it together. FBI, whole other different thing. You could go all day on that one. But that's where with the aldermen and some of the things we had there. So any questions and any specifics? I know I went through a lot really fast. I apologize if I really shot through stuff. Like I say, normally I do a 4 to 6 hour presentation with all the stuff that we do here, but I wanted to touch on some of the things we had.